Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Benchwarmers Sports Talk podcast. As always, I'm Labi, and once again, I am joined after a week away by Jacob. Jacob, it's nice to have you back. How are you doing today?
It's great to be back. Exams are all done, and got 2 weeks to enjoy the holidays, and then back at it again.
Yeah, so once again, just a couple of housekeeping things. This is going to be the last episode of 2020, so next week will be off, and we will be returning in the new year with some brand new episodes. Because of that, there is a lot to get into today, and we'll try to quickly get through a whole variety of topics, most namely NBA, regular season predictions. We'll talk some NHL key dates that have been announced. We'll talk about some college football playoff decisions, and we'll even sort of briefly talk about some NFL Week 15, although, of course, as by the time this will get uploaded, most of those games will already be in the books. So let's just go ahead and swing it over right into the NBA. Of course, the NBA tips off on Tuesday. Raptors' first game is on Wednesday, and it should be a very interesting season this year.
Yeah, no kidding. Playing Toronto basketball in Florida, never would have thought of that in my life. But here we are in a time of uncertainty and weirdness, and I think the NBA out of all the sports will have the most success. Um, I think because the players are a lot more involved than a lot of the other sports are, so that's always good to hear. I think if you're a Raptors fan, there's a lot to be excited for. Uh, Malachi Flynn has been an excellent rookie. Fred VanVleet looks like he hasn't missed a step. Like to be a Toronto fan in basketball right now, you're definitely excited for sure for the upcoming season.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of teams that are really excited to get into it. Of course, one of the biggest news stories leading into the season is that Giannis Antetokounmpo has signed the Supermax. So the Milwaukee Bucks have locked down Giannis for the next 5 years, and that's huge for them. As of course, this year, like every other year for the next 5 years, I can imagine they'll be looking at every season like another opportunity to make a run for the championship. You have the new look Brooklyn Nets. And then in the Western Conference, the Lakers, the Clippers, as per usual, will be looking at a championship, and the list goes on and on. So yeah, your thoughts on the Giannis signing?
Um, well, it's a huge, huge contract. Obviously, was it 5 years, like 200 million or something like that? I don't remember the exact deal, but
Yeah, it's the Supermax, which is
yeah,
basically the most amount of money you can make in an NBA contract.
which is absolutely ridiculous. It's just a ridiculous amount of money. And good for Giannis. He knows what he wants, and obviously a lot of people were concerned about where he was going to play this year, or next year because his contract was expiring. I think the East, if you're as excited as you are to be a Raptors fan right now, you have to be concerned about what this East is looking like. You have the Bucks, the Heat, the Nets. Like um, these are teams who are going to be extremely, extremely dangerous. Russell Westbrook is now in Washington. Like, who knows who's going to come out of the East this year? There's so many different opportunities and different chances for teams to kind of show themselves, especially in this weird shortened season.
No, absolutely. I think that the East has been criticized a lot as being a lot weaker than the West in recent years, and that's been very true. The last couple of years, the teams that have been the number one seed, the number two seed even, have had pretty easy first round matchups. I mean, looking at the Raptors, you're talking about going up against like the Orlando Magic in the first round. And there's no disrespect to a team like the Orlando Magic, but it's a lot different facing a team like Orlando in the first round when you have these Western Conference teams, like the Clippers having to play the Mavericks in the first round is a much tougher matchup. But I completely agree with you where I think the East has gotten not as deep as the West, but it is becoming a lot more competitive where I think this season the 7 and 8 seeds aren't going to be the same walkovers that they used to be, where you looked at Milwaukee in the 1 seed, whoever got the 2 seed, as like, okay, well, the first round is basically a warm-up for them. It should be 4 easy wins. Maybe they drop one, but no one thought that they were going to lose. Where you look at the West last year, a lot of people thought, very wrongly, of course, but they thought that the Portland Trailblazers were going to compete with the Lakers. And that's still a tougher matchup. And I think this year we're going to see whoever gets into that 7 and 8 seed in the East provide a tougher challenge. And it'll be a more complete conference. And as you said, all of these teams that are sort of on the rise, they're really going to be pushing for those last playoff spots. And I think that the playoff race in the East is going to be a lot more competitive this year.
Yeah, I think so too, and I think people need to stop saying the East is such a pushover, and so it's always easy to win in the East. It's not. It's the NBA. Like anyone will have troubles. Like when you go into a game, whether it's against the Lakers or it's against the Magic, you still have to put like you can't just act like it's going to be an easy game or you're going to lose. So I think people need to stop seeing the East as like the easier division because they're both difficult in their own ways. In one division, you have duos like AD and LeBron, or well, before the season, it was Curry and Clay. Obviously, Clay getting hurt, he's done for the year. And then you look in the East, and you just face different difficulties. You have Antetokounmpo you have to get through. You have to get now Kyrie and KD, and now Westbrook's in the East. So I think it's just different challenges. People just don't want to admit because they still want to say that the East are easy wins, which obviously they're not. So it's just interesting to think of. I think if people still, I like to see what people think of the East after this division, after this year.
Yeah, I mean, I still definitely think the West is tougher, but I think the gap has certainly closed. But talking about the East, since we want to sort of preview the season, let's start with the East and let's talk about that and sort of who you think the top seeded teams in the Eastern Conference are going to be, who's going to be fighting for, the 1 and the 2 seeds this year, and then we'll go from there. But to begin, who do you have up at the top?
So I have hold up, I'm just pulling it up right now. So I think Milwaukee's gonna win the division, but I think it's gonna be a very close race between the Heat and Milwaukee. And I say this because obviously the Heat are they're the defending Eastern Conference champions, right? Like they went to the finals last year. They beat Boston, who beat us. So um, I can see obviously Milwaukee going to the top. I wouldn't be surprised if the Heat won it. I wouldn't be surprised if the Nets won it. And the only reason I say if the Nets won it is because guess who's coming back? Yes, sir, Mr. KD. I have an Achilles tear, but I'm gonna play my butt off. And I think he's gonna be that duo. Maybe not so much Kyrie. Kyrie's always been a little bit of a drama maker wherever he goes, but I think KD will definitely be able to take that team to the playoffs. I don't know if they can win that division. I don't know if they'll come close to winning it, but they'll definitely make the playoffs. But it's gonna be a race between the Bucks, the Heat, and I think the Raptors and the Celtics.
Yeah,
Don't forget the Celtics.
I was about to say, it's probably good that you end up saying that because I'm going to go on a bit of a different opinion for my picks. First with the Brooklyn Nets, I think it's very difficult to place what this team is going to do because we haven't seen this combination before. Obviously, it's the first year that they'll be playing together, and it's very interesting. Like you say, Kyrie has those sort of off-court issues attached to his name. Sort of, you can argue whether that's rightly so or not, but Obviously Kyrie's a hell of a player, but team chemistry and that kind of stuff matters, and it matters a pretty substantial amount. And with Durant, obviously Durant, when he's at 100%, there's very few players in the NBA who are better than a fully healthy Kevin Durant. But like you said, when you're coming back from an Achilles injury, sometimes you're never quite the same player. When Kobe came back from his Achilles injury, he was still dominant, but he was never quite the same. Like, he was still elite, but he was never quite the same. He was only at like 95% even when he came back. And so we don't know what's going to happen to Durant. Maybe he needs a year to get back. Maybe he plays the first couple months at like 85%. And that's no disrespect to Durant. That's just, when you come back from such a severe injury, it's very hard to get back up to 100% of the player that you are. And so it's very tough to judge where I think that team's going to go. Obviously, they'll make the playoffs. Obviously, they'll be up there. But I think now, where we stand a couple of days before the start of the regular season, I can't in good conscience pick them to finish first, especially because we know so much about the other teams. We know who they are a lot more. And so for that reason, I'm picking the Celtics to win the conference, just because I think they're too damn deep. And we saw what they did, and they laid an egg in the playoffs against Miami. But last year, they were almost a 50-win team, and they've gotten better. You're talking about a Kemba Walker who is now used to playing within that system. You're talking about a Jason Tatum and a Jaylen Brown and a Marcus Smart who have one extra year, one extra off season of development. I think that it's time for the Celtics to assert their dominance in the conference, and if they're going to do it, they have to do it now, especially because we know Giannis is staying in Milwaukee, so it's not as if they have that chance to sort of, wait and see what happens, because we all know Milwaukee without Giannis is like barely making the playoffs, if that. But this is the chance for the Celtics to take control, and I think they will. I have Celtics 1, I have the Bucks at 2, and then, as much as I just said you can't really judge where they're going to be, I look at this, I think I have the Nets and the Heat fighting 3 and 4, and I've honestly, the Raptors, I have faith in them. I know they'll get wins. I know they'll be a damn good team, but we have to be honest. Without Ibaka, without Gasol, with Lowry 1 year older, we need players like Siakam and Van Vliet and Powell to take that extra step. And I'm not saying that they won't, but we'll have to be realistic, and we have to realistically say that the Raptors are not as good as those 4 teams above them. And so for that reason, I think the Raptors will be 5 in the conference this year. And that doesn't mean that they won't perform come playoff time and they can't make an upset and go deep in the playoffs. I just think that over the course of a regular season, they don't quite have the same talent and depth that they used to. And for that reason, I see them sort of, a little bit on the outside compared to those top 4.
Reasonable. I still think the Raptors will do. I still think it's going to be either the Heat or the Bucks at the top, and then it's going to be either the Raptors and Celtics fighting for the 3rd and 4th spot. I don't think the Nets are going to do any, I don't think the Nets are going to be 4th or 5th, or 4th. They'll be 5th, right behind the Raptors.
Yeah, I can see that. And I think the consensus is those are the 5 best teams in the Eastern Conference, and those teams will be 1 through 5 in some capacity. And so I think the more interesting question is, outside those final 5, who gets the next few seeds? And, obviously we want to do who are the top 8 because playoffs, but obviously the way the system works this year is the 7 through 10 seeds are going to have that kind of play in, which makes the 6th seed that much more crucial because they get to avoid that play in round. So I think in the East and in the West, the biggest sort of piece of drama, especially down the tail end of the season, will be who gets that 6th seed, because they are confirmed in that 8 seed playoff and they don't have to worry about that play-in game. And I think especially in the Eastern Conference, we've sort of highlighted how it really seems like there are 5 teams who are going to be the top 5. it's very interesting in a list of teams where you look at the 76ers, the Pacers, the Magic, the Wizards, which of those teams are going to get that 6th seed. So I'm very interested in who do you think is sort of the best of the rest out of those teams?
I think the Pacers are the 6th seed. I think the Pistons are I think the 76ers are the 7th seed and the Pistons are the 8th seed, and I think that's just how it's going to be.
Bold to pick the Pistons. What's your thought behind that?
Well, look at all the other teams. Trae Young is really the only shining star in the Hawks. The Knicks are the Knicks. They're not doing anything. The Bulls are not going to be good for another 3 or 4 years. The Wizards have one guy, Westbrook, and that's about it.
They also have Bradley Beal.
Okay, fine, and Bradley Beal. But the Hornets, the Hornets suck. And the Magic just won't be good enough this year. And the reason why I'm saying, and the Cavs are the Cavs. We all know that they're going to be garbage. The reason I'm saying that maybe the Wizards won't make it is because of Westbrook. I do not like how he plays. I do not like him as a person. Now, yes, he has talent. Yes, he's done well wherever he goes. Unfortunately, he's not a team player. And that's not going to win that's not going to win a championship. And that duo, Beal and Westbrook, they won't be able to match the other duos that are in this division. They can't match KD and Kyrie. They can't match Simmons and Embiid. They can't match they just can't. Either you need to have a team or you need to have a really good duo in the league now. And they have an average team and they do not have an above average duo. I'm saying it now, they will not make the playoffs for the next 3 years. The Pacers will be the last team. The Pacers will be the 6th. The 76ers will be 7th and the Pistons will be the 8th.
That's bold. And then, but who do you have 9 and 10 for those play-in seats? Because that's the thing about this year in the playoffs is it's not about sneaking into that 8 seed anymore. If you're the 10 seed, you still have a shot this year. And I think that's where things get extremely interesting.
Then I would say the 9th seed would be the Magic. And the 10th seed would be the Hawks. I do think that Trae Young is going to have a breakout season, and I think it's going to be better than the other teams.
Yeah, I think we have some similarities there for sure. The one thing I will say about the Atlanta Hawks is they are really making a push to become a more dominant team. The addition of Rajon Rondo really helps them in terms of depth. It also helps them in terms of having, a good locker room veteran guy who can help ground the team. They also pick up Clint Capella and they have Bogdanovich for depth. If a guy like DeAndre Hunter and Cam Reddish can take that next step developing, all of a sudden the Hawks are a much tougher team to contend with. And so my predictions, I think that the Philadelphia 76ers will get the 6th seed. I mean, there's so much wrong with that team. And obviously a new coach is going to make things interesting. But I mean, I don't think they could be much worse than what they were last year. I don't think they're going to find much success in the playoffs. I don't think they're going to be able to break into the top of the Eastern Conference, but I think it would be disrespectful to put them too much further down than this. And so I think the Sixers do have enough this year to stay as 6. And then for my 4 play-in teams, I'm going to put the Hawks at 7 because I think they took that big of a step forward this year. Obviously, I think it's going to take some time for that team to gel, but when I look at the rest of the league, of the East at least, I think that they have more depth, and Trae Young is a legitimate all-star. He could even have an MVP potential type season this year. I have the Magic at 8 just because they're a good, balanced team, and they always play well. They're always good at, being in and about that playoff spot. They were the 8th seed last year. I believe they were the 7th seed the year before that. They just always find a way to get into the 7-8 seed area, and they'll do it again. They have the talent to be, they have the mid-level talent to be a mid-level team. And then I'm giving my last 2 spots to the Pacers and the Wizards, just because the Pacers on paper have a good team, but they always underperform. But I mean, they're good enough to be a 9th seed. And the Wizards, I agree with you. I think outside of Westbrook and Beal, they don't have anyone. I think people forget just how damn good Beal was last year. Like, he should have been an all-star. He probably should have made like 3rd-team All-NBA. Like, he was that damn good. You can argue that Westbrook will take that a little bit away from that, and I agree he will. But I mean, Westbrook will get his triple doubles. Yeah, he'll shoot incredibly inefficiently, and he won't be that great on defense, but he'll get his triple doubles. He'll help contribute to wins. I don't like Russell Westbrook as a player for a playoff team, but in terms of the regular season, they'll find enough wins to get into the top 10. And I completely agree with you on terms of the outside. The Bulls, the Knicks, the Hornets, and the Cavs just aren't good enough to compete. And the Pistons, like, I don't know. I just think compared to the other teams, the Pistons just don't quite have the talent or the depth good enough to sort of unhinge some of those teams above them. And so I have 76ers 6th, Hawks 7th, Magic 8th, Pacers 9th, and the Wizards in 10th for my Eastern Conference picks.
All right, I still don't think I think the Wizards are not gonna. I don't think they have the team chemistry that'll get them to the playoffs this year. I don't like Westbrook. I really don't. He's selfish and he only cares about his stats.
Yeah, I can see why you would make that conclusion. I wouldn't be that harsh against him, but I completely agree. I think he's I think statistically he's not a helpful player, especially when it comes to playoff time. I just think that I agree with you. I think in a normal situation where there's only 8 playoff teams, they probably don't have them enough. But with the expansion to 10, I have to include them in the top 10.
But look at what happened. He started off in OKC. He started off with KD. KD left. He started off with Harden. Harden left. Like, he was not a very selfless player. He doesn't care about the team. He wants to make sure he wants to be the team. He wants to be LeBron of every team. But he's not good enough and he's not selfless enough. Like, and then he goes over to Houston for a year, and what do they do? Nothing. They did nothing, and he leaves. Like, he's not doing. I don't think I don't think he will ever be a team player. And it's unfortunate. He has a lot of talent. He's a really, really good basketball player. You cannot win a basketball game by yourself. And I don't think he's got that mentality yet, so I just don't think I don't see Washington making it.
No, I absolutely agree with you in the sense of if I want a championship team, I don't think Russell Westbrook's on that team. But what I will say is that every year but one since 2010, a team with Russell Westbrook on it's made the playoffs. So I agree with you in the sense of once the playoffs come, I will bet against a team that has Russell Westbrook on it. But when it comes to the regular season, I'm going to count on them to be good enough to make the playoffs. I think they'll be good enough to make the playoffs, and then when playoff time comes around, start betting against them for sure. But I just think I everything you're saying I agree with, but I still think it's good enough to make the playoffs.
All right, fair enough. Let's move over to the West. Your predictions.
Yeah, so the West, I think, is pretty similar to the East. I think that there's very much a sort of top couple of teams. Then there's sort of the rest trying to fill themselves in. And then you have, I think the West, it's different because I think it's a lot more deep in terms of in the East. For me, it was a lot easier to write off a couple of teams. In the West, it's going to be a lot harder for me to write off teams, especially when you look at the bottom. You know, the Minnesota Timberwolves, for example, last year were 19-45, but on paper, they're a damn good team. Like, how a team with Karl Anthony Towns and D'Angelo Russell, and now with the pick that they just got, I believe they drafted Anthony Edwards. Like, on paper, that's a really good team. But then you have to sort of look beyond paper and say, okay, but then how did that team not even win 20 games last year? And so on paper, Minnesota's a team that I shouldn't be writing off. On paper, the Pelicans, you'd assume Zion with another season if he stays fully healthy, especially with the team that they've started to assemble around him. They should be better on paper. The Sacramento Kings have De'Aaron Fox. They added a lot of other players. They should be good on paper. Never count out the Spurs and Coach Pop. I don't want to write off any of these teams, but at the end of the day, only 10 can make the playoffs. But I think we got to start with the obvious picks, and we got to start at the top. The Lakers are the 1 seed in the West, and I don't see how you can argue otherwise. You could maybe make the argument for the Warriors if Klay was healthy, but he's not. That's going to severely harm them, especially harm their chances at the 1 seed. I think the Clippers, from a morale and chemistry standpoint, are in disarray, and that's going to take some time to figure out. And I think that these other teams, the Nuggets are a good team. Can they do better than what they were last year? I'd argue no. The Rockets took a step back, and we don't even know if James Harden's going to be on the Rockets in a couple of weeks from now. The Thunder, can they do better than they did last year? Probably not. The Mavericks, you'd assume, will improve, but how much can they improve? It's the Lakers' conference to lose. I think the Lakers are 1, and then I think even picking a 2 seed is an extremely tough thing to do. And I honestly don't even know who I want to put in the 2 seed. I'm very confident in the Lakers at 1. And honestly, at this point, I think Golden State is the 2 seed because people forget how damn good Steph Curry is when he's healthy.
Yeah, but people will not forget the fact that Klay Thompson isn't touching a single court this year. Lakers are first. There's no question about it. I'm going to put the Clippers second, and I know they have some chemistry issues, but they still do have Kawhi, and they still do have Paul George, which are 2 incredible players. So I think they'll come in second, and then I think it's going to be, hot take of the day, it's going to be the Dallas Mavericks. I think Luka and Porzingis, I believe, is on that team too. Those 2 players and the rest of the team will just have an outstanding year. I think this is Luka's year. I think he's just going to go absolutely berserk. And then after that, I'm going to say Golden State, Denver, Portland. I don't know what number I'm at. Phoenix. I think Phoenix will actually do better than people will think this year. And then I'm going to say the Pelicans sneak in, and I think the Jazz do okay as well, too.
Yeah, I think there's a lot really good there. I'm still trying to sort of figure out my rankings going down to 10, just because I think that, once again, this conference is just so deep, and there's so many ways that you can go. But I think you just have to be, at some point, you have to be bold, and you have to go out there and just make your predictions. And so here we go. I have the Lakers at 1. I have the Warriors at 2. I have the Clippers at 3. I have the Mavericks at 4. My bold prediction is I think the Phoenix Suns are going to be the 5 seed. My bold prediction is the Phoenix Suns at the 5 seed. Why? Because Devin Booker is incredible, and they actually kind of have a team around him. Chris Paul will be the point guard, and can you just, Chris Paul is going to average 10 assists a game, and how many open looks is he going to give Devin Booker? And if Devin Booker can drop 50 with no help, imagine when he has a playmaking point guard at his disposal. DeAndre Ayton has to make a next step. He just has to. Or, at some point, if you're going to be the dominant player that you were expected to be, you got to step up. Mikal Bridges is a very solid depth player. So is Jay Crowder. They have the team to be that pick. Is 5 a little high? Absolutely, but you got to be bold sometimes. I have the Nuggets at 6, Utah Jazz at 7. I have Houston falling all the way to 8, just because, for the same argument with Brooklyn, I think that people don't people underestimate how hard it is to recover from an injury, and I just don't know which kind of John Wall we're going to see. I also don't know if John Wall is going to be healthy the whole season, and I also don't know if James Harden is going to be a Houston Rocket the whole season. And so for that reason, I'm putting them all the way down at 8. Because, if Harden and Wall are both there, they'll figure it out. They'll make the playoffs. I just don't trust them. I have the Portland Trailblazers at 9, and I have the Pelicans sneaking in at 10. As much as I wanted to pick a team like the Spurs or the Grizzlies or someone like that, I just think that, obviously the small sample size we saw from Zion. And look, I don't want to be that guy who's on the Zion train because let's be real, the ESPN talks about Zion way too much already. But he is a really good player, and and it's not just Zion when we talk about the Pelicans. Like, they actually have a pretty good team around him, and so if Zion can stay healthy, they add Nickeil Alexander-Walker, they still have Redick. Lonzo is not who we thought. Like, Lonzo is not who his dad says he is, but Lonzo is still an excellent on-ball defender, and he's a decent playmaker. So, the thing about this team is Lonzo Ball's not going to be your number one scoring option, but he can get you assists and he can play solid defense. Steven Adams is an absolute monster at a center. Actually, honestly, I should be putting the Pelicans way higher than 10. In fact, I'm going to swap it. I'm moving the Pelicans up to 8. I'm dropping Houston down to 9, and I'm dropping Portland down to 10, and there's my 10.
Fair. All right. I gave you a few. I didn't do it in order, though. So, my first one, bold. That's bold putting Phoenix 5, though. I'll give you that. Lakers first. Clippers second. Mavericks third. Warriors fourth. You know what? I'm going to put Phoenix 5, too. You know what? I think...
Hype train.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to put Phoenix 5. I think they're going to do a lot better than people are actually saying. And then I'm going to put the Nuggets 6. The Jazz 7. Well, actually, I think I have the same list as you, except I switched the first two. Then the Pelicans 8, Rockets 9, and then Portland 10. I have the same list, except Mavericks and Clipper and Golden State are switched.
Yeah, we have a different top 4, and then 5 through 10 is the same. And honestly, we could be completely wrong. I think that at least in the East and in the West to a certain extent, I think that if I was at the end of the season to look at the 20 teams I predicted to be in the playoffs or you make it to the play-in, I think I'll get most of those 20 teams right. I just think that the seeding could be completely wild. But I think that those are pretty reasonable predictions. Obviously, you have to make a few bold picks in there. And let's just get into some quick award predictions to sort of wrap up here, talking about some individual players. So we'll start with the biggest one. Who's your pick for MVP this year?
It's LeBron James, and I think Giannis will come close, but I think Giannis is back-to-back. He's not getting another one this year. I think it's going to be LeBron.
Yeah, I think that's a safe pick. I agree with you. I don't think it's going to be Giannis again. I think when you win back-to-back, the odds are stacked against you to win another one. And so when you look at potential MVP winners, I think that Kevin Durant returning from his injury, probably not going to happen. Steph Curry returning from his injury, probably not going to happen. Although definitely the two of them, if they hit their stride right away, could easily win it. If you had asked me a couple of months ago, or even a couple of weeks ago, I might have said James Harden. Because, quite frankly, if Giannis Antetokounmpo didn't exist, James Harden would be back-to-back MVP. I just don't know if he can sustain that level of dominant performance throughout an entire season again, especially with how weak his team's gotten, especially with all the sort of media speculation and trade speculation surrounding him. And so in order to not be boring and just pick LeBron James, I'm going to say Luka Doncic for MVP.
Hey, I wanted to say Luka is my favorite player, but I just think realistically it's going to be LeBron. If Luka won, man, I'm throwing a party. Come on. If the Mavericks win, I'm throwing a party. It's going to be great. I would love him to win, obviously, but I don't realistically see it happening.
Yeah, I think that because team success matters so much, and I think the Lakers will be the 1 seed. I think because of that, it's going to go to LeBron if my predictions are true. Anyways, I'm also thinking the thing is because I picked the Celtics be the 1 seed in the East, I'm thinking maybe a Tatum MVP. But I think the thing about the Celtics is the reason I have them finishing first is because they're such a well balanced team. And so I don't like, I think Tatum is the leader of that team, but I don't think he's, carrying the team on his back. He's a very, very good player, but he's got very, very good players surrounded by him. Where if the Lakers finish in the 1 seed, it's going to be LeBron or AD winning MVP. So maybe I should pick AD instead, but I'll go Luka just because I think if he does enough with that Mavericks team, and if they finish in the 2 or 3 seed instead of like sort of 4 where I think they'll finish, I think people have to look at him as a legitimate MVP contender.
I agree 100%.
So then we go to Defensive Player of the Year, and I'll start. Of course, this award also won by Giannis the last season. And sticking with Lakers, I mean, once again, you can't really go too bold with these end of year predictions because we kind of know who's going to be in and around the conversation. I think the Lakers are going to do better than the Clippers, and for that reason, I think Anthony Davis will win Defensive Player of the Year.
I agree. I think there's not much of an argument there. AD is going to win it this year.
And then let's move on to the Coach of the Year, which once again, this is going to come down more to sort of which teams we have performing well and who we think is going to do the most. And once again, because typically if you're a team that finishes in the 1 seed, you're going to get recognition somewhere. And because I didn't pick a Celtic to win any of the previous 2 awards, I think that Brad Stevens will win Coach of the Year.
I want to disagree with you, but I don't. I do think as a team, he's done an excellent job, and I think like the Lakers, you have 2 of the best players in the world, but the Boston Celtics, you have a bunch of different players who are able to develop under Stevens' play, and I think Stevens will win it this year.
Yeah, so we're very, very similar. And now comes a couple of interesting awards because they're going to be a little bit tougher to predict, especially because we don't know for sure what lineups are going to look like, kind of what injury situation could happen. And also, we definitely know a decent amount, but basketball isn't our main sport. And so when it comes to picking 6-man of the year, I have to say off the top of my head, it's probably, I'm going to go out on a limb here and I'm going to say that this is going to be a very wrong prediction. But I'm thinking about sort of players who are kind of on the outside looking in terms of being in the starting lineup, and players who are probably going to get a legitimate shot to play a lot of minutes. But the thing is, you also have to think about who's going to come off the bench and who's not going to come off the bench and sort of things like that. And the thing is, like, for a team with like the Brooklyn Nets, they're going to find a way to give guys like Karis LeVert. Like Karis LeVert and Jarrett Allen aren't going to be the main, and Spencer Dinwiddie should be the starting lineup in addition to Kyrie and Kevin Durant. Maybe one of those 3 come off the bench and then they have an incredible season and they win 6-man for that. But I have to go on the assumption that that will be the starting lineup because they'll play just their 5 best players in the starting 5. And so that's like another point with the Raptors, because the first thought that came to my mind was Fred VanVleet. But we know Fred VanVleet's going to start for the Raptors at the 2. Like, Lowry and VanVleet needs to be our starting lineup. If Fred VanVleet's coming off the bench as a backup point guard, I think that's a huge mistake. Like, Fred VanVleet's going to be in the starting lineup. And, of course, you mentioned off the top about how Malachi Flynn has been playing really well. Maybe he gets some backup point guard minutes. And so like the 2 names that came to mind right away for me in Dinwiddie and like VanVleet are players who I ultimately think are going to get some starting minutes for both of their teams. And so you can kind of tell that I'm at a point right now where I'm basically just, wasting time by just rambling while I try to think of kind of other players, because I genuinely am not sure about who I'm going to pick. So while I keep stalling, do you have any players in mind?
I do. And the Raptors picked him up recently. Aaron Baines used to play for the Phoenix Suns. Center, he averaged 11 points last year. So and 42 games played. So I think he's gonna get. I think he has a good shot at getting the award. I think he fits our play as a Raptor team extremely well. He's 6'10", um, which is exactly. I'm hoping he gets. I'm hoping if you're a Raptors fan that he's getting a lot of rebounds and he's getting a lot of assists. Maybe not so much worried about the points anymore because he's on a team that doesn't rely on guys like him to be scoring. So I think he's going to come off the bench, and I think he's going to do an excellent job for this team.
You see, here's the thing: is the Raptors are probably going to have Aaron Baines be the starting center.
Well, are you sure? Like, what? Who else would you put?
It's either it's probably going to be Chris Boucher coming off the bench and Aaron Baines starting.
Oh, I mean,
And so
you can argue Boucher deserves to be on that court starting. Like, he was there in the Raptors. Like, he was there for the 905. He came up, and I think he deserves to get a starting role this year.
yeah, and that's definitely up for debate. So I mean, I think it's definitely a good pick if he ends up coming off the bench. I was really debating just saying Lou Williams because it feels like he wins it every year, but I'm gonna try to go a little bit of a bold pick. I'm gonna say Kendrick Nunn of the Miami Heat because I'm pretty sure he'll be coming off the bench behind Goran Dragic and Tyler Hero. But I'm imagining he's going to get a lot more minutes this year. And I think the thing with the Heat is they're a very balanced team. So I'm sure if he does come off the bench, he'll get ample opportunity to prove himself. And so I'm going Kendrick Nunn for my pick for Sixth Man of the Year.
All right. Very interesting
And then
pick and good
speaking,
stall tactic.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then speaking of Chris Boucher, he was actually my pick for most improved player because I agree with you. I think he'll get a lot more opportunity this year, and I think he'll prove that he can be a starting caliber center in the NBA. And for that reason, I'm going to pick him for most improved player.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. I think if he's not the sixth man or whatever, he's going to be the most improved.
Yeah, and I think that is all the major awards. Once again, clearly, as I'm sure you could tell, I wouldn't put much stock into our award predictions, and for that reason, I'm not going to go off on a limb and start naming all NBA, all defensive team predictions because that's just going to go wrong. And so we will just wrap up the predictions for the NBA season by just asking a very simple question. Jacob, what is your NBA Finals matchup and who is your champion?
If you could, you would slap me through this for my prediction. The Mavericks will be playing the... Who are they going to be playing? They're going to be playing the Heat in the finals. Prediction, that's it.
And who wins?
Mavericks, baby.
I like it. That's a nice, bold prediction.
It's probably so wrong, but I have a lot of faith in Maverick. Like, you saw what they did last year, and had Porzingis not getting hurt, who knows what they could have done.
No, I think that's absolutely true. Once again, I think if making any sort of championship predictions at the beginning of the season, you do it more for fun than anything. Obviously, as we start to actually watch games this year and we start to realize, what teams are this year, we'll be able to make much more accurate predictions leading into the playoffs. But I mean, I don't see any reason why the Mavericks couldn't make the finals. And I mean, the Heat, I don't see any reason why they couldn't do it again. So those definitely aren't crazy predictions as much as they're probably not the, most favorite predictions in terms of like what the odds would say. But no, I definitely think that that's a pretty fair prediction. I'm going to go a little bit more conventional, at least in the West, just because LeBron makes the finals. So I'm going Lakers out of the West. I know it's boring, and I know it's typical, and I know it's not bold in any way, shape, or form, but you always bet on LeBron as his career over the last however many years he's been doing this has proven. And so I learned the hard way of don't bet against LeBron, and so I have to take the Lakers from the West. If I want to go really bold, my call can come from the East. And I don't know if this is really bold considering I picked them to finish in the 1 seed. And I know it's kind of like not bold at all for me to just pick the two teams I have finishing first in their conference, but I think it's the Celtics' year to make the finals. I think that they'll figure it out and they'll come out of the East. I think they proved that they can, be a dominant team. I mean, and I think they learned the hard way against the Heat. But I think that series with the Heat last year, they were more frustrated themselves for missing the opportunity to make the finals, and I think that they won't make that mistake 2 years in a row. But I mean, the Lakers are too good. I'm going Lakers over Celtics in the finals.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Interesting predictions from both of us this year.
Yeah, and so that is going to be the NBA preview. And so very quickly, while we're talking about previews, Jacob, I will flip it back over to you because the NHL has announced some specific dates with respect to their season, and so it gives us a time to come back in January next year, and I think the first episode back will most likely be an NHL season preview. But just quickly, let's throw it over to you, Jacob, because you have the dates on the important dates with the NHL season.
Yes, sir, I do. All right. So, January 13th is the date in which the NHL season is set to start, which, as a hockey fan, you should be very exciting. Very, very, very excited. The 7 teams who did not participate in the qualifying rounds last year in the playoffs their training camps will open December 31st, so kind of like a New Year's gift. April 12th will be the 2021 NHL trade deadline. May 8th will be the end of the NHL season. May 11th will be the playoffs. July 15th Pierre LeBron, will probably be the last day that the Stanley Cup can be awarded in case we want another successful season. The 17th will be the deadline for teams to submit the expansion draft protection list to the Krakens. So that's going to be very interesting this year. And then the 21st will be the Kraken, release the Kraken. And then the 23rd to 24th will be the draft. And then the 28th will be free agency, which this year might actually be one of the best free agencies. So keep your eye out for January 13th, ladies and gentlemen. It's coming. Hockey's coming back.
Yep. So January will start with the NHL season, and based on what you just said, July will be a hectic time for hockey because we'll have a new Stanley Cup champion, we'll have the draft, we'll have free agency, but we will also have everything going on with the expansion draft, and we saw how the expansion draft changed the landscape of the league when Vegas had theirs. And so hockey will be back on January 13th. And so keep your eyes peeled probably a couple of days before then when we will come out with probably a full episode, in all honesty. Because if we went 45 minutes on the NBA, you can imagine how much we'll be able to go on the NHL.
Yeah.
But keep your eyes peeled for an NHL season preview episode a couple of days before that January 13th date. But there are your key days for the NHL. But once again, we want to sort of focus on games and sports that are actually going on right now. And so we'll quickly pivot to college football. And the reason we'll talk college football before we get into some NFL talk is because today was a big day in the college football landscape as the college football playoff teams have been decided and the 4-team playoff is now finalized. So first in the first semifinal, we have number 1 Alabama playing number 4 Notre Dame. And in the other semifinal, we have number 2 Clemson playing number 3 Ohio State. So Alabama, undefeated SEC champions. Clemson, 1 loss, but it was with Trevor Lawrence out with COVID. They were the ACC champions. Ohio State, undefeated Big Ten champions. Notre Dame get in as a 1-loss team. That 1 loss, of course, coming yesterday against Clemson in the ACC championship game. And then a couple of big teams that just miss out. At number 5 was Texas A&M. 1 loss was against Alabama. And then also at number 6 was Oklahoma, who were the Big 12 champions, but they have 2 losses on their resume. And then Cincinnati at number 7, who are the American Conference champions at 9-0, but clearly the committee deciding that they didn't play enough good teams, or that 9-0 record wasn't good enough to put them over, some of these more established programs. So your thoughts on the 4 teams who made it and the few that didn't?
Well, there's no surprise about who's in there right now. There's no surprise. However, there was a surprise to me in the sense of, where's Florida? Now, if you guys do not watch college football, that's fine. There was an incident in which Florida was cost the game and arguably their playoff spot these playoffs. Labi, I'm sure you've watched the game, or you have at least seen it once or twice.
Yeah, the guy threw his shoe and it cost him the team. It cost his team the game.
So what happened was Marcus Wilson of Florida. They stopped the push against LSU. They stopped the push on 3rd down, and they're about to punt, and a flag is thrown. Why is a flag thrown? Wilson picked up the guy's shoe and he threw it across the field, which was a 15-yard personal misconduct penalty, which LSU ends up scoring on the very next play. So, first off, what was he thinking? And second off, why did he do this knowing this could be a penalty that resulted in Florida not making the playoffs? I think the teams that are there deserve to be there, but I think it would have been very different had this genius of a player decided not to whip that shoe like Trevor Bauer did the ball halfway across the field.
Yeah, here's the thing about that. Obviously, it's a stupid play, and they really shouldn't have lost that game. But they lost to Alabama in the SEC championship, and even if they had beaten LSU, they would have had 2 losses on their resume, one to Alabama and one to Texas A&M. So Texas A&M would still be above Florida. Florida would have had to have beaten Alabama in order to get into the playoffs. So as much as I do agree with you that he was an idiot and he cost his team a game against LSU, at the end of the day, they would have needed to have beaten Alabama on top of that, and they weren't able to do so. And so in terms of Florida, where they're ranked, I think it's pretty fair. In fact, you can argue that they're still ranked pretty highly for a team that lost to LSU. But no, you're absolutely right. Florida had a really golden opportunity to get into the playoff, and at the end of the day, that LSU loss definitely cost them an opportunity, but this is just how close the margins are in college football. They lose by 3 to Texas A&M. They lose by 3 on that dumb penalty to LSU. They lose by 6 to Alabama. And that's the difference between them being ranked where they are and instead of them being ranked in the top 4. And those really are how close the margins can be in this sport. The one thing I will say with respect to the top 4 is, it's so tough for a team like Cincinnati. And here's the thing. Is Notre Dame a better team on paper than Cincinnati? Probably. Is Texas A&M? Probably. Is Oklahoma? Probably. They're all ranked above Cincinnati. Is Florida a better team than Cincinnati? They probably are as well. But, Florida had a chance against Alabama and lost. Texas A&M had a chance against Alabama and lost. Notre Dame had a chance against a healthy Clemson team and lost. Cincinnati hasn't had that opportunity because they've had to play the teams within their conference. So I would have loved to have seen Cincinnati, undefeated American Conference champions, get that 4 seed instead and say, well, here's your opportunity. You're playing Alabama. Try not to lose by more than 20. Because, as much as I can't argue with the decision to pick Notre Dame at 4, Notre Dame on paper are 17.5 point underdogs against Alabama. And if we saw the way they played against Clemson in the ACC championship game, they lost 34-10 with a fully healthy Clemson team. They only managed to beat Clemson in double overtime without Clemson's main quarterback and best defensive player. So, at the end of the day, is Notre Dame the fourth best team in the country? Probably. But they lost by 24 points to a healthy Clemson team. Texas A&M played Alabama earlier this year. They lost by 28. Oklahoma, they're the Big 12 champions, but they also have 2 losses on their radar. And then, Florida, like you said, they've made some stupid mistakes that's cost them. Cincinnati haven't made any mistakes this season. They're a perfect 9-0. And basically what the committee is saying is if you want to make the top 4, if you want to make the playoff, you have to be in one of these big conferences or else we're not going to pick you. And I think it's understandable, but also from, an outsider's perspective, it's a bit sad, and I can see why a lot of Cincinnati fans would be pissed off. And you know what? I hope that Cincinnati, in fact, I'm just going to check to see if their bowl game has been announced. It has. They are playing Georgia in the Peach Bowl. So they do get a New Year's Six bowl, which is good for them. They definitely deserve that. But I'd honestly like to see them play a better team than Georgia. Like, why can't they play Texas A&M? Why can't they play Oklahoma? Obviously, Georgia's a really good team, but Cincinnati ranked 8th, Georgia ranked 9th. And I think for Cincinnati to still be ranked below Florida, below Texas A&M, and below Oklahoma is a bit disrespectful. But once again, this is the big test for Cincinnati, because if they can beat Georgia, a very good team, then they can start to say, hey, you should have put us in that top 4, because I can only imagine that Alabama is going to demolish Notre Dame in that semifinal.
Yeah, I think Alabama's probably going to win it this year, to be completely honest with you. It does suck. Cincinnati's getting cheated out of this because they're just not in the same division. They're not a division that, is not a big division? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. They're 9-0. Show a little bit more respect on them, but I guess that's business, right? Like, people would rather see these 4 teams play than Cincinnati. It's just how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why, honestly, for me, the bowl games that I want to take a look at is I want to look at the undefeated non-Power 5 conference teams, particularly Cincinnati, because honestly, the American Athletic Conference is the best non-Power 5 conference. So it's the 6th strongest conference. They went 9-0. 7 of those wins were by double digits. The other 2 teams I want to watch are Coastal Carolina, who, yes, they're playing in a much weaker division, but they're also 11-0, and San Jose State, who do play in a weaker conference as well, but they went 7-0, and every single one of their wins were by double digits. And so outside of the college football playoff, I want to take a look at these teams. Coastal Carolina is playing Liberty in a bowl game, which honestly, now that I think about it, is not that great of a matchup for them. San Jose State are going to play Ball State in the Arizona Bowl. So once again, the thing with that is that's so disrespectful. These are undefeated teams, and they're not even getting good bowl game matchups. At least Cincinnati got a good matchup against Georgia. And I hope they absolutely demolish them, because the committee needs to start giving these other schools a chance when the opportunity presents itself. And we have an opportunity where the opportunity presents itself. Yes, there are 3 undefeated teams in Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State. They deserve to be there. But that 4th seed was wide open, and they should have given it to Cincinnati this year and should have given them a chance to prove themselves. But let's just do a quick prediction, because I'm sure this will be very quick. Alabama versus Notre Dame. Who do you got?
Alabama.
Yeah, I think that's pretty obvious. And Clemson versus Ohio State. Who do you got?
Ohio State.
Wow, okay, I have Clemson. So then for you, your national championship game will be Alabama versus Ohio State. Who do you got?
Alabama.
And then I have Alabama versus Clemson. I'm going Clemson. I think ultimately it comes down to either Alabama, Clemson, or Ohio State. And I don't really think you can go wrong with any of your predictions. But there you go. You have Alabama and Clemson as the predictions to be national champions this year. And, quite frankly, I wouldn't even bother watching Alabama Notre Dame. There's honestly no point. And that's the last thing I will say about this is I think Alabama Notre Dame, a lot of people aren't going to watch that because they just know Alabama's going to win.
Yeah.
And I think that if it was Alabama-Cincinnati, even if a lot of people assumed Alabama would win, more people would watch because they'd want to see what a team like Cincinnati would do, given an
Yeah.
opportunity to play in Alabama.
Will David like slay Goliath? Like one of those stories.
Exactly. And I think from that reason, an Alabama versus Cincinnati game would be more appealing from a marketing standpoint, from a fan standpoint, than Alabama Notre Dame. But what do I know?
Yeah, we're just people doing podcasts on a budget. Like we don't know anything, right?
Exactly. And so just to wrap up today's podcast, let's take a brief look around the NFL. And let's just talk about the big story this week was that the Buffalo Bills, with their win yesterday, clinched the AFC East. Your thoughts on Bills Mafia?
Let's go for the first time in 25 years, or 25 years, I believe it was. Oh no, 20 years. 20 years. They won in 1999. The Bills win the
25 years. No, you
Oh,
were
it was
right. 25
25.
years.
Okay.
1995 was the last year that they've won the division.
All right. With an 11-3 record. Like, holy crap, these guys are legit. Like, each week I keep getting surprised at how good these guys are. I know I'm a Bills fan. I'm also a Browns fan. We'll get into that later because you and I got a big matchup tonight. Um, like they destroyed them 48. They destroyed. Yeah, it's Denver. So what? They almost scored double digits in every single quarter of the game last night. They never cease to surprise me at how fantastic this team is. Moss is an excellent running back. Josh Allen is a legit quarterback. And Stephon Diggs is the receiver that he needed. He got 147 and Beasley too. The two of them combined for 259 yards. That's absolutely insane. This team keeps surprising me in the best of ways, and I think they very well deserve this AFC championship.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the Buffalo Bills are the real deal. We'll be able to get a much better look at that in the playoffs, and they will get a chance to really prove themselves come playoff time because, of course, the one thing about Buffalo is we know that, they do not, they have not been successful at even making the playoffs recently, but then maybe 1999 was the last time they made the playoffs. Before they made the playoffs, I think it was, last year or 2 years ago?
Last year.
Yeah, and so, obviously winning the division is a massive step in the right direction for them. The next step is for them to win a playoff game, and it will be really interesting to see who they're matched up against and sort of what that will end up looking like and see if they can get a win. And then just quickly, in terms of some of the other key games in the NFL this week, the Dolphins and the Patriots could be a very crucial game for wildcard implications.
Well,
As of right now, it's 15-12 Dolphins with about 5 minutes to go, and that's got to be a must-win game for the Dolphins.
Well, the Dolphins have the ball at New England's 11, so they're in scoring position. Like first and 10, New England 11. New England obviously sucks, and I'm sorry to say it, but Bill Belichick has just not been able to work with Cam Newton the way he was Brady. The Dolphins, I don't know I can't remember who the coach is, but he's playing to their advantages.
Brian Flores, and I completely agree with you. He could be coach of the year this year.
And he should be. The way he's playing the Dolphins right now, like like Bruce Arians has a thing. His thing is you're going to throw the ball long. That's why Winston had so many interceptions last year, is because it's a long ball game. But you look at Flores, and he's kind of just looking at the players. Okay, you're a good runner. We're gonna run this play. Like he plays. It's 3rd-and-1 in New England's too. So the Dolphins are probably gonna score here, which would make it to a 21-12 game, probably out of reach. But he's playing to the players' advantages. He's not making people do things. He's not making anyone go out of their comfort zone. And that's what you need. You need a coach that's able to work with their players instead of force their players. Let's take you and I for example. You're a left. You kick with your left, so you were mostly on the left side, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I never went to I was never anywhere near the right side of the field.
But your coaches, first and goal now. They're gonna get a touchdown. So, But basically, your coach said, okay, you're never going to the left side. You're never going to go to the right side because that's your weakness. No, he's going to play to your advantage and what's going to work best for the team. What Arians will do is he'll make you play defense on the right side and say you're going to kick the ball down the field every single time. And obviously that's not going to work every single time, and there's going to be turnovers and goals scored against you. So that's why I think Flores should, and I think that's why Flores will get Coach of the Year. Him or McDermott, both have been playing absolutely insane.
Yeah, there's definitely a couple of coaches who could win Coach of the Year, and I think Flores is right up there. And I agree with you. I think that the Dolphins are basically maximizing the roster that they have. Their record is representative of who they can be at their absolute best. Where I agree with you, I think there are some teams where you look at their record and say they can be better than that. I completely agree with you.
Well, look
the Dolphins just scored their touchdown.
Look at Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Look at Pittsburgh. They did not deserve that 11-0. There were some games they should not have won.
But they found a way to win. So the one thing I will say is, I mean, if the Steelers have lost a couple of games, which is why Tomlin is probably out of the running, but you have to give credit to the Steelers where it's due. Like you're right, the team is not good enough to be an undefeated team, but you have to give the credit where they were able to find wins.
Change my mind. That was that Steelers team was the most overrated 11-0 team I've seen in recent years.
I agree with you, but I don't think that matters because I don't think the Steelers care about whether they're overrated or underrated. At the end of the day, they got the wins they needed to clinch the division, and that's all they care about, and now they'll focus on the playoffs. But I agree with you. Like, was that on paper, is that team good enough to be 11-0? No. Should that team have been 11-0? No, there were games that they probably should have lost, but I think that's a testament to the fact that they were able to find ways to win and their opponents weren't. So I agree with you in terms of like the narrative, like, oh, this is the most overrated 11-0 team. That's probably true, but the fact of the matter is they were 11-0. They got the job done. They clinched the division, and they're going to be looking strong in the playoffs. And at the end of the day, whether they're overrated or underrated, it's going to come down to whether they can win. Just like the Bills, like the Bills season will be remembered for winning the division because that's significant for them because they haven't won the division in forever. Steelers fans don't give a damn about the division. They're going to judge their team based on what they're going to do in the playoffs. And so for the Steelers, they're focused on that. And then I think that there's probably two other big games this week, and it's the Chiefs and the Saints, and then the Browns and the Giants. So I'll give you a chance to talk about both of those games.
I actually don't think the Chiefs and Saints game is as big. Like, yeah, they're good teams, but they both clinched their division. So, playoff wise, it's not so big. They're gonna win that division because right now the Bucs are losing to the Falcons. So, I think the Browns and Giants game is a significantly more important game. Now, I say this because the Giants, obviously, you're quite a fan of them. They're still leading that division. Washington is catching up on Seattle, and you really, really need them to lose because
Washington better lose that football game.
And for the Browns, like the Ravens could go like 9-5 on the season, which as myself being a Browns fan, I don't want that to happen because they'll be tied with us. So for the Browns, this is a very, very, very important game, more so than it is for Kansas City and New Orleans. These are very important playoff implications for both of these teams.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think obviously the Chiefs and Saints game is important, but it's important for seeding. And like you said, both of those teams are in the playoffs. So it's important in terms of the nuances of, trying to be that number one seed and get a bye, which is very important. But I completely agree with you that the Browns and the Giants is a much more important game because their playoff lives are at stake. And that's obviously more significant than being a 1 seed versus being a 2 or 3 seed. I think, though, for the Chiefs, obviously a lot of people, myself included, were talking about how important it was for the Chiefs to be the 1 seed or for the Steelers to be the 1 seed when they were 11-0 because only the 1 seed gets a bye. So just briefly talking about that, I think if the Chiefs can win this game and go to 13-1, I believe that locks them in to No, it doesn't, because the Steelers can still win 14 games. So the Chiefs need a couple more wins to lock down the number one seed. And so that would be, it's a big game for them to try to win. I think it's more important for the Saints, though, because they're trying to keep pace with the Packers in being the number one seed, where I think the Chiefs have the advantage over the Steelers now. So I think this is a huge game for the Saints. And I believe Drew Brees is back.
Yep. I think bringing him back is a very, very bad idea right now.
I agree, and I think that's a very risky decision for the Saints, and so that's why I think it's a very interesting game for storylines.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a really, really bad idea though. Like if you're a Saints fan, I don't think I'd be very happy at this, because if he gets injured, it could be the end of his career.
Yeah. At this point, I think they're gambling Drew Brees. Like, he better be 100% healthy, because I agree, if you're gambling Drew Brees on being the 1 seed versus being the 2 seed, I'd argue that that's way too risky. But you're absolutely right with the Browns and the Giants. The Giants need a win to match with Washington, assuming Washington actually loses to the Seahawks, which I'm really hoping they do. So it's a massive game for the Giants, because they're still, I can't believe I'm saying this, but the 5-8 Giants are still in the hunt for the division. So they will be playing for their playoff lives. And I absolutely agree with you. If the Browns lose, the Ravens, I believe, are up by like 40 points against the Jaguars right now at time of recording.
Yeah, it's 40-7. It's ridiculous.
So they're going to win. They're going to go to 9-5. If the Browns lose, they drop to 9-5, like you said. And the Ravens have the tiebreaker, so the Browns would drop past below the Ravens in the wild card hunt. And like we said, the Colts and the Titans are both 9-4. If they both win their games, and then the Browns drop, a loss right now today by the Browns could drop them out of the playoff hunt. You have the Titans winning right now and the Colts winning right now. So a loss by the Browns today drops them out of the playoffs as it stands. A win for the Browns keeps them ahead of all of those teams. And for the Giants, a loss would keep them a game back of the Washington football team, and a win, once again, this is obviously predicated on the Seahawks holding on against the football team. Mm-hmm. I almost said the name you're not allowed to say anymore. So the Giants need that win to keep pace in the division. And so I agree with you. That's going to be a crucial game. And in terms of storylines, Freddie Kitchens is calling the plays for offensive plays for the Giants, because the Giants offensive coordinator is out with COVID. And so Freddie Kitchens, of course, the fired Cleveland Browns coach, will be calling plays against his former team. It's a Sunday night football game. It's going to be so much fun to watch. I can't wait. So let's just finish today's podcast by saying who wins, Browns or Giants?
Browns are winning that game.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Hold on, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but one thing before I let you speak. The one thing about Freddie Kitchens is he's not a very good coach. So, I'm not sure how the Browns are going to do, the Giants are going to do offensively against the Browns, because the Browns decided Swiss cheese is the best analogy for their defense. So,
yeah, that's the thing. The one thing I will say to try to defend the Giants, because I completely agree with you, the Browns should win this game, is that the Giants' defense has been surprisingly good this year. And I know that the Browns like to run the football, and the Giants' run defense has been pretty damn good. And the Giants' offense is the problem, and Daniel Jones is out. It will be Colt McCoy at quarterback. But Colt McCoy is 1-0 as a quarterback this season. Just got to throw that out there. And the one thing with the Browns is their one weakness is defensively. And so the Giants need to move the ball. But I agree with you. I think the Browns will find a way to score points, because the games that the Browns lose are typically more high-scoring games where they give up like 30 points and lose a game like 30-27. And the Giants the Giants win football games like 17-14 because their defense keeps them in it and their offense does enough. And so I agree with you. I think all the signs are pointing towards a Browns win, but I would just love it if my Giants could pick up another just completely undeserved win, and just I so badly want the Giants to win the division as a meme, especially because the 7-9 Giants are like the most deadly playoff team like historically, and it would be so funny if that happened. But I completely agree with you. I think the Browns will win the game. And so with that, any final thoughts on everything in the world of sports?
Yeah, well, the Bucks actually just scored and now they're ahead, so that could be actually be problematic for the Saints.
Yeah, and there you go. So, of course, like we said, this is our final episode of 2020. And so we want to take this opportunity to wish you all a happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. We all know 2020 was not the best year. And, obviously 2021 will probably start the same way that it's been for the last while. But
Yeah, no kidding.
here's to looking forward to a much better 2021. And what we do know for sure is that it will be a 2021 filled with sports.
What can anyone else ask for? We got the World Juniors in a couple of days. We got hockey starting in like 2 weeks or 3 weeks at this point. What a
Yeah, I
weird
can't.
time to be alive.
We completely just glanced over the World Juniors because that's how much sports are going on.
That's
Can we
something
just
for
talk
another.
about how?
Okay, yeah, we
Yeah,
can quickly talk about it.
well, no, I just want to point out that Canada has 20 first round draft picks on that team. Are you kidding me? How loaded this Canada team
Oh, it's
is.
wild. And Kirby Doc was named captain, plays for the Chicago Blackhawks, and I think it was Cousins and Byron were also as alternates.
Yep, that's completely true. And so, I mean, once again, we kind of talked about the World Juniors a while ago. Realistically, all I have to say about the World Juniors is I'm pretty sure that the Canadian fans are only really hesitant of playing the Americans, just like I'm sure the American fans are really only hesitant of playing
Really
Canada.
hesitant, yeah.
Like if we look at this line, like Canada's lineup is loaded. We like 20 of the 23 players are first round draft picks. That's how good this team is. But the Americans, once again, Spencer Knight in goal. They have an incredibly talented team as well. That's why we didn't really need to talk too much about it because I think everyone knows it's Canada versus USA for this gold medal.
Oh yeah, exactly. Also, that the person who caught the go-ahead touchdown was Antonio Brown.
You're joking me.
Antonio Brown catches his first touchdown with Tampa Bay.
There you go. And I think that is probably the most fitting way to end the podcast for
And
the
Tampa
year
Bay just got the
2020.
ball back. Oh, all right. Yeah, that's a great way to end it. Antonio Brown's got the go-ahead touchdown.
And if that doesn't sum up the world of sports in 2020, I don't know what will.
He got
So
bounced around, and now he's back and winning.
there you go. So once again, for the final time in 2020, we want to thank you guys for listening or watching or however you end up enjoying the podcast. We want to thank you guys for your continued support throughout the year, and we look forward to a full 2021 talking about the world of sports. But until then, happy holidays, happy new year, and we will see you all in 2021.
Take it easy, guys. Gang, let's go. Yeah, he got the go-ahead touchdown. That is genuinely hilarious. That's absolutely beautiful.